Welcome to this presentation on Yohimbine and anxiety, and why this supplement may not be worth the risk for many lifters. Yohimbine is often marketed as a fat loss aid and stimulant, especially in products aimed at people chasing stubborn fat or stronger pre-workout energy. But the same properties that make it feel intense can also make it uncomfortable, unpredictable, and risky. In this video, we're going to look beyond the hype and focus on the trade-off between potential reward and possible harm. We will cover what Yohimbine actually is, why it can feel so powerful, how it affects the nervous system, and why anxiety-prone users may be especially vulnerable. The goal is to help viewers make a clear, evidence-informed decision before putting this ingredient into their body. Yohimbine is often presented as a secret weapon for stubborn fat and explosive energy. On the surface, that sounds appealing, especially for people who feel like they have already tried dieting, cardio, and training but still want an extra edge. The problem is that the same stimulant rush that makes Yohimbine feel powerful can also trigger anxiety, restlessness, palpitations, and sleeplessness. So the real question is not just whether Yohimbine can increase stimulation. The question is whether that stimulation leads to meaningful fat loss, or whether it simply pushes your nervous system into overdrive. In this presentation, we will break down the difference between feeling activated and actually getting a useful result. That distinction matters because a supplement can feel strong without being worth the risk. A common mistake in supplement marketing is treating stimulation as if it automatically equals progress. More stimulation can make you feel energized, alert, and ready to train, but it can also mean more stress on your nervous system. With Yohimbine, that stress can show up as anxiety, palpitations, elevated heart rate, increased blood pressure, and trouble sleeping. For some people, especially those already prone to anxiety or panic, that trade-off is not small. It can affect not just the workout, but the rest of the day. This slide is about reframing the conversation. Instead of asking how strong does this feel, we should ask, is my nervous system paying too high of a price? A temporary buzz is not worth it if it compromises recovery, mood, sleep, or cardiovascular comfort. Yohimbine is an alkaloid that comes from the bark of the Yohimbe tree. It is important to understand that Yohimbe bark is not just one clean ingredient. The bark contains many different alkaloids and Yohimbine is only one of them. Some supplements use Yohimbe bark extract, while others use isolated or synthetic Yohimbine. That distinction matters because bark extracts can be less predictable. They may contain varying amounts of Yohimbine along with other compounds that can also affect the nervous system. Yohimbine is marketed for fat loss, energy, and sexual wellness, but those marketing categories do not tell the full safety story. Just because something comes from a plant does not mean it is gentle. Yohimbine has real pharmacological effects, and those effects can be intense. One of the biggest issues with Yohimbine products is that labels can be confusing. A product may say Yohimbine bark extract, Yohimbine, Yohimbe, or a branded blend, and those terms do not always mean the same thing. A bark extract is not the same as purified Yohimbine. Bark extracts can vary dramatically in their actual Yohimbine content, and may also include related stimulatory compounds such as rauwolsine. This creates a dosing problem because you might think you are taking a controlled amount when you are actually taking an unpredictable mixture. Natural does not mean standardized, safe, or mild. In supplement form, inconsistency is one of the biggest risks. When the label does not clearly disclose the exact active dose, it becomes much harder to manage side effects or assess whether the risk is reasonable. Yohimbine feels intense because of how it affects the sympathetic nervous system. It blocks alpha-2 adrenergic receptors, which normally help regulate norepinephrine release. When those receptors are blocked, norepinephrine activity can rise. Norepinephrine is involved in alertness, arousal, and the fight or flight response. That is why Yohimbine can feel like a strong stimulant rather than a subtle fat loss aid. The mechanism is also why the supplement is marketed for fat burning. More norepinephrine may increase lipolysis, or the release of stored fat from fat cells. But mechanism is not the same as guaranteed fat loss. Increasing a signal related to fat release does not automatically mean you lose more body fat in a meaningful, sustainable way. It also means you may feel more stressed and wired. When norepinephrine rises, your body can shift toward a fight or flight state. That can feel like heightened arousal, but it can also feel like restlessness, jitters, sweating, and a racing heartbeat. For some users, the sensation may feel energizing at first. For others, it can feel uncomfortable almost immediately. Yohimbine can raise heart rate and blood pressure because the body is being pushed into a more activated state. Anxiety-prone users may feel this spike more strongly because their nervous system is already sensitive to physical signs of arousal. Something as simple as a pounding heart can be interpreted by the brain as danger, which can escalate into panic. This is why Yohimbine is not just another fat burner. It can create a physiological state that mimics or triggers anxiety. The anxiety-related side effects of Yohimbine are not minor for many people. Users may experience nervousness, restlessness, trembling, sweating, palpitations, insomnia, and racing thoughts. These symptoms can be especially concerning because they often feel similar to a panic episode. Even if the supplement does not cause a true panic attack, it can create the physical sensations that make someone feel like they are losing control. For lifters, this can ruin the training session rather than improve it. A supplement that makes you too anxious to focus, too restless to execute lifts safely, or too wired to sleep later is not helping performance. The key takeaway is that Yohimbine can create a strong subjective response, but strong does not always mean useful. Sometimes it just means your body is under stress. This slide highlights why Yohimbine is especially concerning for people with panic vulnerability. In research comparing patients with panic disorder to healthy controls, Yohimbine produced stronger anxiety-related responses in the panic disorder group. These responses included greater anxiety, nervousness, palpitations, and tremors. The anxiety response was also associated with markers of norepinephrine activity, which fits the mechanism we discussed earlier. People who experienced more frequent panic symptoms tended to respond more strongly. This matters because Yohimbine is not just psychologically stimulating, it can amplify the physical sensations that often drive panic. For someone with a history of panic disorder, anxiety sensitivity, or trauma-related hyperarousal, Yohimbine may be a poor fit. The possible upside is small, but the downside can feel immediate and severe. Anxiety is not the only concern. Yohimbine has also been associated with nausea, gastrointestinal distress, headaches, dizziness, sweating, flushing, and more serious adverse events in some cases. Reports have included seizures, heart attacks, and arrhythmias. That does not mean every person who takes Yohimbine will experience severe effects, but it does mean the ingredient has a risk profile that should be taken seriously. Many people assume supplement side effects are limited to mild stomach upset or jitters. Yohimbine is different because it directly affects the sympathetic nervous system and can influence cardiovascular activity. The higher the dose, the more sensitive the user, or the more stimulants combined with it, the greater the concern. This is why caution is not fear-mongering, it is appropriate risk management. Because Yohimbine stimulates sympathetic nervous system activity, it can increase heart rate and systolic blood pressure. For a healthy person at a low dose, that change may feel like an intense stimulant rush. For someone with high blood pressure, arrhythmia risk, or cardiovascular disease, it can be much more concerning. The risk becomes greater when Yohimbine is paired with caffeine, because caffeine is also a stimulant that can raise alertness, heart rate, and blood pressure in sensitive users. Combining the two can amplify cardiovascular strain. That is why this slide emphasizes heart rate and blood pressure as key monitoring points. If a supplement makes your chest feel tight, your heart race, or your blood pressure spike, it is not something to casually push through. Those signs should be taken seriously. Yohimbine has been linked in adverse event reports to arrhythmia, hypertension, seizures, heart attacks, and heart failure, especially at higher doses or when combined with other stimulants. This is one of the most important safety points in the presentation. Natural does not automatically mean safe. A natural compound can still have powerful drug-like effects on the body. Yohimbine activates pathways that influence blood pressure, heart rhythm, and nervous system arousal. When combined with caffeine, synephrine, rauwolsine, or other stimulants, the cardiovascular load becomes even more unpredictable. This is why people with heart rhythm concerns, hypertension, or a history of cardiovascular disease should avoid Yohimbine. For most lifters, the possible fat loss benefit is not worth introducing a compound with this kind of risk profile. One major danger is that Yohimbine rarely appears alone. It is often paired with caffeine, other stimulants, or proprietary fat-burning blends. This increases the total sympathetic load on the body. When stimulants are stacked, side effects do not necessarily add up in a simple, predictable way. They can compound. Anxiety can become more intense. Heart rate can rise more than expected. Blood pressure can increase. Sleep can suffer. And because many formulas use proprietary blends, you may not even know how much of each stimulant you are taking. If you value your health, avoid multi-stimulant blends that include Yohimbine, especially if they also include caffeine, rauwolsine, synephrine, or similar ingredients. A formula that feels intense is not automatically effective. Sometimes it is just risky. This is one of the most important evidence-based points in the presentation. Yohimbine's mechanism sounds compelling. Alpha-2 receptor antagonism, increased norepinephrine, increased sympathetic activity, and potentially increased lipolysis. but a mechanism is not the same as a real-world result. Human studies on Yohimbine for fat loss and performance are limited, small, and inconsistent. Feeling stimulated does not mean you are burning significantly more body fat. In fact, side effects like anxiety, nausea, insomnia, and elevated heart rate can impair training quality, reduce sleep, and make consistency harder. If a supplement makes your workouts worse or your recovery poorer, any theoretical fat-burning benefit becomes irrelevant. The body responds to the total picture: diet, training, recovery, stress, and adherence. Yohimbine's mechanism does not override those fundamentals. The weight loss evidence for Yohimbine is not strong enough to justify the hype. Human trials are scarce and inconsistent. Some studies suggest small changes in fat loss markers or body composition, but there is no robust proof of meaningful, reliable fat loss for the average lifter. This matters because the marketing claims are often very bold. They imply that Yohimbine is a targeted fat loss solution, especially for stubborn areas. In reality, fat loss is driven primarily by a calorie deficit, consistent training, adequate protein, and good sleep. Yohimbine does not replace those basics. If someone is not losing fat, the answer is almost never add a harsher stimulant. It is usually to reassess calories, consistency, training, and recovery. Gambling your nervous system on a weak theory is not a smart long-term strategy. Yohimbine is also not a reliable performance supplement. Athletic research is limited and inconsistent, and there is no clear evidence that it reliably boosts strength or endurance. Some users may feel more stimulated or aggressive during training, but that does not mean they are actually lifting more, running faster, or recovering better. In contrast, there are better supported ergogenic aids available, such as caffeine, creatine, and beta-alanine. Those supplements have stronger evidence and more predictable use cases. If the goal is performance, it makes sense to prioritize ingredients with real data behind them. Yohimbine may feel intense, but intensity is not the same as performance. A supplement that increases anxiety, heart rate, or insomnia can easily do more harm than good. This slide summarizes the imbalance between the possible rewards and the likely risks. On the reward side, Yohimbine may offer a small potential benefit for fat loss or perceived energy, but the evidence is limited and the practical effects are uncertain. On the risk side, the concerns are much clearer: anxiety, palpitations, blood pressure increases, panic-like symptoms, sleep disruption, and potential cardiovascular complications. When the possible benefit is small and uncertain but the risk can be immediate and intense, the risk-to-reward ratio becomes hard to justify. Your health matters more than a marginal calorie burn or a temporary stimulant rush. For most lifters, the smarter choice is to focus on safer, better supported strategies. Yohimbine is a poor fit for several groups of people. Anyone with anxiety or panic disorder should avoid it because it can amplify the exact symptoms they are trying to manage. People with PTSD or high stress sensitivity may also react strongly because Yohimbine pushes the nervous system toward arousal. Those with high blood pressure, arrhythmias, cardiovascular disease, or heart rhythm concerns should avoid it due to its cardiovascular effects. Pregnant or breastfeeding individuals should not use it. People taking stimulants, antidepressants, blood pressure medications, or other relevant medications should be especially cautious because interactions can occur. If you fall into any of these categories, the risk is not theoretical. There are safer ways to approach fat loss and training support. Even if someone understands the risks of Yohimbine, product quality adds another layer of unpredictability. Extracts vary widely, and a Yohimbe bark extract may not match what the label suggests. Proprietary blends can hide the exact stimulant amounts, leaving users unsure of the true dose. Multi-stimulant formulas increase unpredictability because multiple compounds may act on overlapping pathways. A product that claims to be more intense may simply be more likely to cause side effects. This is why label transparency matters. If a company will not clearly tell you how much Yohimbine, caffeine, rauwolsine, synephrine, or other stimulants are included, that is a reason to walk away. You cannot dose responsibly when the label does not provide clear information. The evidence tiers give us a structured way to evaluate Yohimbine. Mechanistically, it makes sense that alpha-2 antagonism can increase norepinephrine and sympathetic nervous system activation. That part is plausible. However, the caution tier is also strong. Anxiety, restlessness, palpitations, tremors, elevated heart rate, and blood pressure changes are well aligned with the mechanism. The evidence for fat loss and performance is limited. That means the risks are more predictable than the benefits. The label risk is another major issue because extracts vary and hidden blends can make dosing unclear. When the benefit evidence is weak, but the risk evidence is strong, that should shift the decision toward caution. This tiered framework helps you see why the supplement may sound interesting but still be a poor practical choice. Let's address some of the biggest myths. Myth: Yohimbine is a safe natural fat burner. Fact: it is a potent stimulant with serious risks for anxiety-prone and cardiovascular sensitive users. Myth: more stimulation equals more fat loss. Fact: stress hormones and nervous system overload can harm sleep, training quality, and recovery. Myth: a mechanism guarantees results. Fact: human evidence for real-world fat loss and performance is limited and inconsistent. Myth: labels always disclose exact Yohimbine amounts. Fact: content varies and proprietary blends hide doses. Myth: caffeine cancels out side effects. Fact: caffeine can make the anxiety and cardiovascular response worse. These myths are common because they make the supplement sound exciting. But facts matter more than excitement when safety is involved. This slide is a direct safety reminder. The content is educational and is not medical advice. Yohimbine should not be stacked with caffeine or other stimulants, especially if you do not know the exact dose of each ingredient. Anyone with anxiety, hypertension, heart issues, PTSD, pregnancy, or other health concerns should avoid it unless specifically cleared by a qualified healthcare professional. If you experience adverse effects such as panic, palpitations, dizziness, high blood pressure, chest discomfort, or severe nausea, stop immediately. A supplement should support your goals without making you feel unsafe. There is no need to prove toughness by pushing through stimulant side effects. If your body is sending warning signs, listen to them. Instead of relying on stimulant overload, focus on the fundamentals that actually drive results. Fat loss comes from a calorie deficit, not from chasing a stronger buzz. Lifting weights helps preserve muscle and supports body composition. Staying active helps energy expenditure and metabolic health. Protein intake supports muscle retention, satiety, and recovery. Quality sleep is essential for hormones, appetite control, training readiness, and mental health. If you want supplements, choose options with stronger evidence and clearer safety profiles such as caffeine used responsibly, creatine, and beta-alanine. The message here is practical. Do not gamble with your nervous system when the basics already work. Sustainable results come from consistent habits, not stimulant extremes. The final verdict is straightforward. Yohimbine has a plausible mechanism, but the risk is high, especially for anxiety-prone users and anyone with cardiovascular sensitivity. Anxiety and cardiovascular side effects can easily outweigh any possible fat loss benefit. This is not a beginner-friendly supplement, and most lifters should skip it entirely. The slide makes an important point. If a supplement feels like an attack on your nervous system, the upside probably is not worth it. Fat loss should not require feeling panicked, restless, or unsafe. For the vast majority of people, the better path is to focus on proven basics: calorie control, resistance training, protein, sleep, and evidence-based supplements with a more predictable risk profile. A short-term rush is not worth compromising your health.